The most famous woman in news is currently living through a headline she cannot report. At 2:28 a.m., while the world slept, an 84-year-old grandmother's heart stopped sending its signal to the cloud. But Nancy wasn't having a medical emergency. According to investigators, she was being erased. No one heard the glass break. No one heard a struggle. All that remained on the porch of her multi-million-dollar Tucson home was a smear of blood and a garden plant, carefully placed, allegedly, to blind her security cameras. 55 days later, investigators are monitoring ransom demands in cryptocurrency. Analysts are tracking a suspect described as carrying a common retail backpack, and a daughter is left asking the question that haunts many families. Was she targeted because of me? This isn't just a missing persons case. It's a calculated abduction scenario that raises disturbing questions. And as of late March 2026, the suspect remains unidentified. To understand how someone vanishes from the Catalina foothills, you have to understand the terrain. This isn't a high-traffic urban center. These are winding, desert roads carved into the base of the Santa Catalina Mountains. Here, houses are separated by thickets of saguaro cacti and rocky arroyos, washes that stay dry for months until a flash flood turns them into raging rivers. It is a place of extreme privacy, where neighbors might go days without seeing one another. It is the perfect place for a predator to hide in plain sight. Nancy Guthrie loved this desert. She moved here for the light, the quiet, and the proximity to her family. But on the night of January 31st, that very isolation became her greatest vulnerability. The desert doesn't just provide beauty, it provides cover. And for the individual who stepped onto Nancy's porch that night, the desert was an accomplice. The final hours of Nancy's known timeline were remarkably ordinary. On a quiet Saturday evening, she hosted a small dinner for close family members. Those who knew Nancy described her as the glue of the family, a woman whose faith was her North Star and whose kitchen was her sanctuary. They talked about upcoming spring plans and Savannah's busy schedule in New York. At 9:48 p.m., Tommaso walked Nancy to the door. He watched the light in the hallway flicker on. He waited until the heavy, automated garage door hummed shut and locked. It was a routine they had practiced 100 times, a ritual of safety. As Tommaso drove away, he saw the silhouette of the mountains against a moonless sky. He had no way of knowing that a shadow was already waiting in the brush, watching the taillights of his car disappear into the distance. At 9:50 p.m., the house went dark. Nancy Guthrie was alone. Law enforcement has spent thousands of man-hours reconstructing the window between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m. This is the black hole of the investigation. At 1:47, the first security breach occurred. A masked figure, captured in high-definition infrared, approached the front door. He didn't use a crowbar or a brick. He reached up with gloved hands and yanked the Google Nest camera from its housing. The feed cut to static instantly. But this is where the mystery deepens. For 41 minutes, the house was silent. There were no alarms tripped, no glass breakage sensors activated. During this time, Nancy's heart rate was being monitored by her pacemaker. The data shows she was in a deep sleep. Her pulse was steady until 2:27 a.m. In that final minute, her heart rate spiked. It was the flight or fight response of a woman suddenly realizing she was not alone. At 2:28, the sync failed. The connection was severed. The suspect had not only taken Nancy, they had taken the evidence of her life. When investigators arrived on February 1st, they found something that suggested a terrifying level of premeditation. Stuck to the lens of a secondary, hidden camera was a cluster of brittlebush and creosote, native plants ripped from Nancy's own flower bed. Investigators call this the bouquet of weeds technique. By placing the foliage directly over the lens, the suspect created a natural-looking blur that blocked the view of the driveway. To a casual observer checking a phone app, It would look like a branch had simply blown in front of the camera. It was a sophisticated bit of fieldcraft. It allowed the suspect to move Nancy from the house to a waiting vehicle without being recorded. This wasn't a crime of passion or a drug-fueled burglary. This was a professional snatch and grab. The suspect knew the camera's blind spots. They knew the flora of the yard. They knew exactly how much time they had before the next scheduled security patrol. The most devastating discovery wasn't what was missing, but what was left behind. On the concrete of the front porch, near the heavy oak door, forensic teams found 3 distinct droplets of blood. DNA results confirmed it was Nancy's. The pattern was a drip stain, suggesting she was stationary for a moment, perhaps struggling or being restrained. There was no cast-off or arterial spray, which gave the family a desperate shred of hope. It meant the injury was likely minor, a cut or a scrape, rather than a fatal wound. But for her family, seeing the photos of blood on that porch was a turning point. It transformed the case from a missing persons inquiry into a violent felony investigation. The sanctuary had been violated. The desert was no longer a backyard. It was a crime scene. On March 26th, days into the investigation, the public followed closely as a close family member spoke emotionally about the case. She addressed a theory that had been circulating. Was this a targeted kidnapping? She recalled a conversation with a relative experienced in security analysis. She asked the question many would fear: is this my fault? Was she taken because of me? His silence spoke volumes. Investigators are exploring whether this was a targeted abduction designed to create leverage. The family has reportedly received multiple communications, some believed to be hoaxes, others containing unsettling details. The ransom demands arrived not by phone call, but through encrypted channels. The demands were specific: $1.1 million in cryptocurrency, to be transferred to a rotating series of digital wallets. The FBI's cyber division has been tracking these wallets across the dark web, but the suspect is using mixers to hide the trail. This level of technical skill contrasts sharply with the suspect's physical appearance. In the only clear frame recovered from a neighbor's camera, the suspect is seen carrying a black, 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker pack. This is a $30 backpack sold at every Walmart in America. It is the ultimate gray man gear. It tells the FBI that the suspect is smart enough to use high-level encryption, but disciplined enough to wear the most common, untraceable clothing possible. He is a phantom in a Walmart hoodie. As we speak, search teams are still combing remote desert terrain. These dry riverbeds act as highways for the desert's predators. A person could travel for miles through these deep, sandy trenches without ever being seen from the road. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has deployed drones with thermal imaging, but the Arizona sun bakes the rocks to such a high temperature that heat signatures become blurred. They are looking for anything: a discarded shoe, a piece of blue cardigan, or the black backpack. Nancy has been gone for 55 days. She is without her medication. She is without her support system. The clock isn't just ticking, it's screaming. Behavioral analysts have released a preliminary profile on the individual they believe is holding Nancy. They describe a mission-oriented offender. This is someone who likely has a background in private security, the military, or high-end tech. They are patient. They watched Nancy's house for at least 2 weeks, a theory supported by a scouting incident on January 11th. This suspect doesn't want chaos. They want control. They chose an 84-year-old woman because she was the path of least resistance for maximum psychological impact. By propping the back doors open, the suspect was sending a message: I can come and go as I please. It was a display of dominance aimed directly at the Guthrie family. The question now is, what happens when the suspect realizes the eyes of the world are too bright to hide in the shadows anymore? A close family member has announced plans to return to public life despite the ongoing case. When questioned, her response reflected resilience. She would not allow fear to dictate her life. She is going back to work to show that her family cannot be broken. But behind the makeup and the teleprompter, she is a woman waiting for a phone call that may never come. She has turned her public platform into a spotlight for her mother, using every broadcast to remind the suspect that the entire world is watching. The Guthrie family has blown on the embers of hope for 8 weeks. They are praying for a miracle in the desert. They are waiting for the moment the silence is finally broken. Nancy was more than a headline. She was a grandmother who loved the quiet of the morning and the smell of the Tucson rain. She was a woman who lived 84 years of a good, clean life only to be snatched away in the middle of a Saturday night. As of March 28, 2026, the suspect with the Walmart backpack is still out there. The Bitcoin wallets remain active, and the blood on the porch is a permanent stain on the piece of the Catalina foothills. Someone in Arizona knows where that black backpack is. Someone knows why those back doors were propped open. If you found this case disturbing, share your thoughts below. Cases like this raise real questions about safety, surveillance, and vulnerability. Subscribe for more true crime-style stories and deep dives. I am reading every comment.